I-V-M.
Have you ever wondered why women don't do more crime? Well, we're here to tell you. There's misconduct all the time. Women are thieves and murderers.
That's gross misconduct.
Con artists, money launderers.
Criminal misconduct.
Financial fraud that's hard to track.
Takes some planning, but still misconduct.
Even breaching a contract.
Well, that's more civil though.
It's misconduct. Misconduct. We tell you all about women that suck. Things that make you say, what the? It's misconduct.
Hello, and welcome to Misconduct. We're a podcast about Indian women that did some horrible, awful things. Sometimes crime, sometimes just unethical stuff. Sometimes they refuse to pay their domestic worker a living wage and treat them like human beings. Just, bad stuff. Anyway, I am Raghavi.
And I am Nisha. And on today's episode, we talk about Hasina Parkar, who headed a massive crime syndicate in Mumbai, starting in the Nagpada area in 1991 and eventually taking over all of Mumbai. She also happens to be sort of real big deal, just very small thing. She is the sister of the famed Mumbai underworld don Dawood Ibrahim.
Oh, I know what you're all thinking. Gasp! How are we going to cover Hasina Parkar, who is, like Nisha said, the sister of Dawood Ibrahim, without getting ourselves in trouble? Well, we will do it by aggressively listing every public source we can find for every word that comes out of our mouth. And you know what? We're given to understand that that's how good research works. You have to list sources.
Apparently, that's a thing that we do.
Hey.
But of course, this episode is about the underworld. So expect descriptions of violence, criminal activity, for sure. This podcast is not for children. So listener discretion is advised.
It is. We've advised you.
Over and over again. And we will continue to advise you because we don't want to get into trouble.
Oh no. You can really, you sort of get the theme of what's happening here. Like we're trying our best to be as informative while as not getting into trouble. But since we're on this, let's start with organized crime in Mumbai. What? Yeah. So the Bombay underworld is not a joke. Okay.
Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Bombay underworld.
Bombay underworld.
Bombay underworld is not a joke, Raghavi.
I was genuinely scared for a second. What a loser. Okay, the Bombay underworld is not a joke. Okay, guys. A lot of cities in India have organized criminal activities. And many of them are in the form of like families that take over administration and like protection of different towns. And they earn quite a bit of money either from their criminal activities and also in part from like picking up, tribute from the local townsfolk as well. For Bombay specifically though, there's been a lot of Bombay has been a big city for a long time. And of course, there'll always be some extent of criminal activity. But it really like sort of started in the 40s with Karim Lala and his family. And the Lalas primarily operated around Bombay's docks and ports, and they were allegedly involved in everything from drug trafficking to extortion to gambling, gold smuggling, contract killings, just you name it. And one of our sources that I had read for this was the writer Hussain Zaidi. His books are really, really fun. Okay, it's like a weirdly dramatized account of a lot of his encounters with folks from the Bombay underworld. There's this one book which was called From Dongri to Dubai. He describes Lala's empire around this time. And he basically said that he was super active from the 1940s till about 1985. Also, there is a DNA India article that calls Lala the grand old daddy of Mumbai's criminal underbelly.
Ew, dude.
Yeah,
You know what? Daddy used to be such a cute word. Like sometimes I used to call my dad daddy. Now I don't know.
True.
This youthful generation have ruined it.
We were those youths. I feel like I have to clarify that. But yes, in the that's Lala's reign. Then in the 70s and 80s, like slowly building up some clout, came Haji Mastan. So Haji Mastan, Nisha, you'll be very proud to hear this. He was actually Tamil born.
Hey, South
I
India
know.
represent.
Yeah, represent. Anyway, he grew up to control all the smuggled gold and silver
Oh,
and
shit.
electronics good market in Bombay. You know what? It is still something to be proud of. I feel like we're not represented as bad people enough, maybe. I don't know. But in any case, Mastan had a lot of influential people on his side, particularly Bollywood royalty. While I was researching for this, I came across this photo apparently that's very famous. It's just him chilling with like Dilip Kumar and Saira Banu at some award ceremony or something like that. Yeah, so these are all people that had like, you know, some clout. They were famous in their own you know, in their own ways. There are also other famous dons from this time. There's this guy called Varadarajan Mudaliar, who's also Tamilian. Yeah, there's loads of these folks. We don't have time to get into everyone though, because in the 1980s, one particular boy rose from some very simple origins. And this was our boy, Dawood Ibrahim. And when I say our boy, what I really mean is this man that I fear with every fiber of my being. And I would go out of my way to not piss him off.
Sounds reasonable.
It sounds reasonable, yes. His empire is called the D Company. You guys would have heard about it. It's sort of kind of everywhere.
It's a nice name. Great name.
It is. Hey, oh, by the way, I did a very rudimentary public search for registered trademarks and applications in India.
For
Just
this
like to look up
name.
for D Company. Yeah, I was just like, hey, do you think anyone would have registered it? And if they had, who is it? And I looked it up. I couldn't find anyone that had registered the word or like, you know, a logo that says D Company specifically.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. I don't think anyone would want to dare to take that name to sell anything.
And that is a good call. You are very smart.
So D Company was a little different from the localized organized crime gangs that Mumbai had seen so far. D Company kind of became like a global phenomenon.
Yeah.
Dawood Ibrahim is currently on Interpol's list of most wanted people, and we meant super most wanted people. Please do not approach this guy on your own. Call the damn police and we'll try to deal with it. There's this like laundry list of things that Interpol says that he's wanted for, which is organized crime, transnational crime, terrorism, crimes involving the use of weapons or explosives, fugitives, crime involving life and health, counterfeiting, forgery, thefts, and my personal favorite, hooliganism.
Hey.
I don't know why, but when I hear that word, I can only think of like my teacher coming into class and be like, "This is fish market or what?"
Did every teacher say that? Everyone. We never had any. We went to the same school when you were kids, but we never had any teachers in common. And they still all said
All
that.
of it. Yeah.
Everyone.
Except for the Arabic teachers who would just be like, "Hey, hayawanat," which basically means
zoo.
animals.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's like you're a zoo. Hey, I forgot about that. That's true. They would say that. Yeah.
which is kind of cute because Dawood Ibrahim was residing in Dubai for a long time. And it is reported that he left in 93. We actually have no discernible clue about where he is now. I don't want to also. All these crimes that we're listing are just alleged. Remember that no court has ever prosecuted him. They haven't even got the chance to question him. He's just wanted at this stage, not convicted. Also, we are not getting into this any further. This is not about him. We just want to set some context for what this time looked like for Mumbai in general. This episode, however, is about Hasina Parkar, his sister extraordinaire. So let's just get into that.
Yes, let us get into that. Before we start, though, there is one thing I wanted to say. Researching this episode was genuinely a task. Like I've been at it for almost like 2 weeks. Okay. There are loads of reasons for this, of course. Firstly, I would say primarily like due to self-preservation, newspapers did not report on her much.
Right.
If they did, they didn't go into much detail, you know, like if there were statements made or they managed to get some documents from like the police and stuff, then there was stuff that's reported. But otherwise it was very high level, like nothing really to use. We also, I mean, I don't know if this is specific to her. She just was very quiet about her work.
Right.
It's not like, I'm assuming it was a really thick, like close gang of people that wouldn't tell on each other because it is a very family oriented sort of a business also, right? So I think that's probably what that was. And that's likely how that happened. But one more really, really important reason that I found it's so hard to wade through the information that I needed for this is because all I found was a sea of articles about the Hasina Parkar movie.
Oh my God. Yeah, dude.
Yeah, with Shraddha Kapoor in it.
I'm so tired of seeing her face, this Shraddha Kapoor's
Yeah.
face this entire week. But I mean, I guess at some point, like some level, we have to say thank you to this movie because Hasina's
that?
life got pushed into the limelight again.
Oh, okay.
So because of that, she ended up getting like coverage again. There was quite a bit of coverage, no real sources. So
Ugh, fine.
yeah, whatever.
Have you watched the movie though?
No way. The only thing,
Oh.
and like as I was reading the various Hasina Parkar movie articles, I just saw that Sonakshi Sinha was apparently the first choice.
Oh, hey.
Yeah.
Why did
Right?
that not happen? I feel like that would have been a good choice.
There was some clickbait article which I clicked on obviously, and it was because
course.
apparently her dates were not matching. Some rubbish.
Oh, okay. I don't know. I mean, I feel like, face-wise also she looked a lot like Hasina
Right?
Parkar. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that would have been a good, good for her.
Also, she has talent.
That's hey, harsh, bro. But yes, where are we? Oh, Hasina, right.
Hasina.
Hasina's early life, which is where I wanted to transition into. So Hasina was born in 1959 in a tiny town in the state of Maharashtra. It's called Ratnagiri. She is from a Marathi Muslim family.
Okay.
She was the daughter of Ibrahim Kaskar, who is a head constable with the Mumbai police, and Amina B. She was a homemaker. So Hasina is one of 12 siblings. She was the 7th in line.
Oof.
What else do we know about her early life? That's it. That's all we know.
We do know that she got married
Yes.
to Ibrahim Ismail Parkar. The exact date of the wedding is not clear, but we know that she had 4 children, 2 daughters and 2 sons. They are known to have lived a happy life, which was also established apparently in that 2017 movie, Hasina Parkar movie. I just read the Wikipedia page. But
Oh,
yeah,
good
by
for
all
them, though.
accounts, yeah, good for them. By all accounts, Hasina was not remotely involved in the D Company's affairs until 1991. Dun, dun, dun.
Gasp.
So what happened in 1991? Something extremely tragic. Raghavi was born.
Hey, what the hell?
No, I'm kidding. I'm sorry. But no, something really sad did happen, which was her husband Ismail was killed, allegedly by a rival gang headed by Arun Gavli.
Oh,
So-
dude, that's
Yeah.
awful.
It is awful.
Yeah.
And through the late 80s and 90s, the Arun Gavli gang was involved in a power struggle with the D Company.
Mhm.
By the way, an India Today reporter refers to Gavli as Daddy.
What?
As in, that was his gang name.
Why do they keep doing this?
I don't
Why are they
know.
called that? It's so upsetting.
It is.
Oh, I mean, I don't know what to do with that information, man. Why did you tell me this?
I don't know. I just wanted to tell you. It disturbed me. It should disturb you also.
Fine. Can we move on from this daddy thing generally?
Yes, we shall. So, after her husband passed away, the D Company allegedly organized a shootout of a member of the Gavli gang called Sailesh Haldankar. Various news sources reported that the D Company sent out 2 of their own men, that's Lambu Shakil and Brijesh Singh, to avenge Hasina's husband's death. In what is now a very famous case, the 2 men went on to shoot and kill Sailesh Haldankar. This is famously known as the JJ Hospital shootout because it happened right by JJ Hospital in Nagpada, Mumbai.
Right.
Both men were arrested and prosecuted for the killing, but eventually acquitted. In 2008, they were discharged by the Supreme Court due to lack of evidence. Eyewitnesses also failed to recognize them, so they were let go.
You know, Bollywood is making a movie about this too. This very specific, the JJ Hospital shooting.
Oh.
It's called Shootout 3, apparently. And it has Aditya Roy Kapoor, who's playing the lead. Actually, wait. When I say lead, you may ask who is the lead character in a situation like this. I don't know. It could be any of those people. Maybe he's just playing a doctor, JJ Hospital, who witnessed. I don't know, something.
Maybe.
But you can bet that I will watch it just to see if Aditya Roy Kapoor is whatever his character plays. Let's just hope his character is shirtless while playing them.
Here's hoping. But
Mm.
I'm sorry, did you say Shootout 3? Like, are there other shootouts?
Yes, actually, there were two other. I mean, well, it's three, so there were other other shootout movies.
I mean, Krish 3 happened, but there was no Krish 2.
Oh, oh, I never thought about that.
Yeah. It's Koi Mil Gaya Krish 3.
Oh shit. Okay. Oh my god, my world is shaken. But no, the other two shootout movies. One was Shootout at Lokhandwala, which is actually really like that movie. This was about.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Yeah, it's about the 1991 standoff that happened in the Lokhandwala complex. It went on for some 4-5 hours.
Oof.
The other one is Shootout at Vedala, which I haven't seen actually.
Okay. I haven't either, but I
Mhm.
mean, there's just too many shootout movies anyway.
that's fair. Yeah.
Also, oh, sorry, this something that we didn't mention before.
Mhm.
Nagpada, where JJ Hospital is, that
Mhm.
is predominantly where Hasina would go on to live and rule from.
Yep.
But let's get into that in a bit.
Yeah, let's actually take a little break here. When we come back, what was Hasina up to? We'll find out.
Welcome back after the break. Before the break, we were talking about Hasina Parkar's husband and how he was murdered. So
Oh.
after that, Hasina is alleged to have slowly picked up a part of the D Company's operations in Nagpada specifically.
Hmm.
Now, there are a lot of allegations against her. Hindustan Times, for example, reported of land grabbing, extortion, kidnapping, contract killing. The same report also says that apparently she was far more brutal than her male counterparts. To which I say, what? Who cares? Why
Why?
even mention that?
Yeah, it's all. I mean, I don't think it really matters whether you're a woman or man in this,
Yes.
in any sort of business in relation to this. But yeah, sure. Okay.
I suppose.
Mhm.
But do we know for sure that she did all of this? No.
Yeah.
Much like us, every newspaper uses the term alleged crimes. But
Mhm.
there are some interesting insights that we would like to put together to understand the extent of her power.
Mhm.
The first one is on construction. Apparently, in 1990s, no building could be constructed in Nagpada or other areas that the D Company operated in without her approval.
Mhm.
This was particularly a concern for areas that fell under the administrative power of the Slum Rehabilitation Authority of Mumbai, or the SRA.
Mhm.
The Hindustan Times reported that she would likely charge for this privilege to construct a building.
Yeah, I actually read an India Today article. This is not specific to Hasina. It's just about the Slum Rehabilitation Authority, the SRA projects that were being undertaken by by the SRA. Basically, it came to a point where there was so much rampant corruption, likely within the SRA, that the Bombay High Court had ordered an investigation of some 247 projects. There's another article, DNA India, I think, they reported that out of all of these, the Anti-Corruption Bureau had started probing at least 11 of the projects sometime in like the mid 2000s. So this whole SRA land corruption scam thing, it's not an unnoticed thing. Like even the Bombay High Court understood that it was a pretty big deal at the time. So it was very widely reported, not in the context of Hasina at all. Just generally,
Right.
it was quite widely reported overall.
But I guess that it's not very different from like what we see in all of these American crime movies, right? You pay some tribute and then the local don like does, and then you pay the tribute to the local don and then you get to do some work, that's just how the movies
Yeah.
are
Oh,
portraying.
you mean like they approve the stuff that
Yeah.
you can do
Yeah,
based
exactly.
off of the tribute. Yeah, actually, it's interesting you mentioned crime movies. How have we gone so far without talking about The Godfather? I mean, it just seems like the
I
right
know.
right? The thing is, I get what you're saying, because these movies really romanticize the idea of like organized criminal organizations generally. Organized criminal organizations. Anyway, when you watch the Godfather movies itself, like for example, are you ever really like on the side of the local population of that area? I mean, you don't know if they're ever happy or not happy, with Don Corleone's protections. Like, you don't know any of that, right? Or you don't know what the local people are really going through, except that one time they come and ask the Don for something at his daughter's wedding.
You come
You
into
only
my
hear
house.
about no. Just respect me. No, all you hear about is how tough Michael Corleone's life is.
Yeah,
Oh
that's
my God,
true.
it's so hard for him. How
Yeah.
family is everything, gang wars are justified. So we've always seen a lot of these things from the lens of the dons themselves. So it's sort of difficult for us to really understand how it works, like on the ground level, you know?
True.
Mhm.
Actually, even like when they're talking about Vito Corleone, how he
Mhm.
takes over New York, it's like it talks about the slow, gradual rise to power, and it's he's fashioned as like some sort of messiah or something who's come to
Yeah.
like protect the local people from the
Mhm.
greedy cops and the administrators who have done them wrong and things
Yeah.
like that.
Oh, I don't want this responsibility, but give me. I mean,
Yeah.
That's basically it. Yeah.
Yeah. Hasina.
Oh,
Around
yes.
this time, she actually began to be known as Appa or
Mhm.
elder sister.
Mhm.
She moved into the Golden Hall apartments in Nagpada. I
Mhm.
mean, this isn't some big fancy place. It just looks like quite normal from the outside.
Right.
I don't know. Maybe it's like all of the other Mumbai apartments. They look like rain washed and bland on the outside, but like
Yeah.
full of finery and riches on the inside.
Yeah. Actually, now that you speak about this flat, I think
Mm.
2019,
Huh.
there are a bunch of reports about how one of her flats was auctioned for 1.8 crores or something of
Whoa.
that nature. Yeah. No, that's not the best part.
Huh.
The apartment is only 800 square feet.
What?
Yeah, that's all it is. So we don't know who bought it. Their identity was withheld. That's fine. It's private property. But 800 square feet for 1.8 crores,
That's
which is
crazy.
just, yeah.
What is this,
But I
like
think-
Mumbai real estate prices, or is this just because it comes with a tag of,
Actually, it could be a bit of both, right? It was likely maybe even an auction. We don't know. It could have
Okay.
been both. But what I do here understand is that the central government has taken over the flat
Oh, okay.
as of 2019 itself, I think. Because none of Hasina Parkar's relatives at the time could prove that she had purchased it legally or something around that nature. We don't have much
okay.
more information about this. We
Okay.
just know that it was sold for that much for an
Interesting.
800 square foot apartment, which is
It's
a
crazy.
joke. Yeah.
She was also allegedly involved in the cable laying and operating business. So there's construction, there's cable. She's basically like building everything that she needs for a home. Also, when I say cable, we mean cable television for all of
Right.
you Gen Z listening to us.
Hey, do you
That's-
think we have Gen Z listeners?
I don't know that. I mean, I feel like I would be very happy if I had Gen Z listeners.
Yeah.
Am I with it, guys? Am I cool?
Disgusting. You made it weird.
So cable television is that thing that you used to use, that's the set-top box and the cable and all of that jazz. And sometimes it would rain and then your satellite dish would fill up with water and then there is no more TV.
Oh God. And then like it's right in the middle of some incredibly important test match, cricket match, obviously. And your dad will lose his shit for 2 hours straight. Because he's all like, why should the infrastructure crumble just because it rains? And you're like, Dad, it's a literal dish. It catches water. What do you want me to do?
Yeah, so Mumbai essentially had a cable war going on. Different cable operators would like divide up chunks of the land in the city, and the local folks within an area would be forced to pick a certain cable operator. I mean, essentially, like no competition, and customers could be charged whatever the operator wanted to charge them.
Right.
As recently as 2014, Mumbai Chief of Police had indicated setting up of a special investigation team to look into it. So India Today reported in 2007 that cable operators would first ask APA whether they could demarcate an area in the city for themselves.
Right.
And apparently Hasina would be generous enough to also provide them with security if they got her approval.
So, I mean, again, like I know this might sound like I'm romanticizing it, okay? But like when you really think about it, this sort of protection in a way would sort of ensure that things wouldn't get violent between rival gangs. Because think about it, like something like the cable business, it's a lot of money, right? I'm not saying there's no money in it.
Right.
And if there are rival gangs, it's very likely it might get violent. And there's essentially a figurehead here in the form of Hasina who is just saying, I'm going to control this. Like, again, I don't want to condone any behavior here. But what Hasina was doing is effectively, she became a form of police control herself. Except instead of
Right.
serving like the public at large, like law enforcement is supposed to do, she just chooses to protect those that pay her tribute or, come and ask her for permission in a respectful way. You know what I mean?
It's still like, I mean, just the situation is still kind of scary and violent in itself, I
Of course,
guess.
yeah. I guess,
But
yeah.
I mean, I see where you're coming from, but like, I would still, obviously, we would all prefer if like the people who were supposed to govern still continue to govern.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah,
and-
I agree.
and yeah. So if that
I mean, yeah,
happens,
I guess there were those gaps in
Yeah.
the law enforcement process, and like, I mean, Mumbai is a big city.
it's huge. Yeah.
It's massive, and I kind of get if some people just felt that they needed protection somewhere else. Again, none of this is us saying, "Oh, okay, yeah, Hasina was chill." I mean, it's a very tough, very nuanced question, and I kind of get where a lot of people would be coming from at the
True.
grassroots level. That's
Yeah.
what I'm trying to say. But
Hmm.
that one India Today article that Nisha said had really gotten into some of the other stuff that she did. There is one more that we thought we'd highlight. So the underworld generally, across the world, is not specific to India. The underworld generally is very involved in Hawala. So what is Hawala? It is a form of money transfer. And it's kind of done without actually physically moving any money. There's a lot of nuance into it. Please go ahead and Google it. It's basically dependent on a network of brokers around the world that are talking to each other and sort of have their own stockpiles of money.
Right.
So as I say that out loud, Hawala doesn't sound too bad. Like it just sounds like a network of banks, right? But Hawala does become a problem when you consider the fact that governments haven't recognized it as, like a recognized form of money exchange or transfer. Plus, it becomes very easy to use for money laundering because there is no
Right.
oversight.
Right.
It also, you don't know the identity of the sender when you look at Hawala. So it's, while, it might create this alternative network where it might be easier to transfer money, there is no control or regulation around it. But I do want to say, India made it a little worse than necessary. Like especially in the 70s to the 90s, India had this really strict foreign exchange law called the Foreign Exchange Regulation Act of FERA.
Okay.
So among a bunch of other things, they made it really hard to send money out of the country or bring it back into the country. Okay. So even if you were a normal middle class family, you wanted to send money out because, your kid is like, studying abroad, or you're an NRI living abroad, you want to send money back to your parents. All this stuff was really limited because a very small amount of cash was permitted to be sent. And the banks charge these crazy amounts of fees. So Hawala really grew around this time, especially like the 80s and 90s. It became a really big deal. A lot of normal people relied on Hawala because it was the easiest for them, no questions asked, very little fees, and it was transferred. So the Indian underworld, like the rest of the world, really banked on this. And we are given to understand that Hasina managed this on the D company's behalf. It became stronger post 1993 after her brother moved, and she effectively carried on the operations on her own.
Yeah, this actually was quite neatly captured in this another India Today article from 2007, because it just outrightly says Hasina Apa runs a proxy business for her brother Dawood.
Oh, wow.
So it's like it comes to a point where the newspapers aren't even like shy to just say it out loud.
Yeah, there also there are multiple accounts that I had read, but these are unsubstantiated. Okay, it feels like stuff that's just put out there for like sensationalizing it. There are some newspapers that said that she was also involved in negotiating for the distribution rights for Bollywood films, especially in the Middle East and in Russia. Again, I don't have a legit source for this, so
Okay.
we'll have to assume it's untrue until it's proven true.
Yeah, we don't know. We don't.
That's true.
So just to do a quick recap, to put it really simply, Hasina ruled over Mumbai for several years, starting from 1993. She controlled it all from her seat at Nagpada. At one point, she reportedly had assets worth 5,000 crore rupees. Upon her death, a lot of reports came out whether she owned land illegally. A Deccan Chronicle article from 2014 says that when Mumbai police was investigating this, apparently the additional commissioner of police at the time said, "We will investigate this matter thoroughly, whether Hasina Parkar amassed a huge wealth through illegal means." The same article says that she owned as many as 150 properties, including Mumbai's posh localities like Bandra, Andheri, Borivali, and Meera Road. I've lived in Bandra and Andheri, and I know someone who lived in Borivali, and I just have to say, damn.
Damn, indeed.
Hasina's lawyers, Shyam Keswani, however, had some like harsh words for these people. He's quoted to have said, "If anybody has amassed illegal wealth, will that person gloat about it in public? According to me, Hasina Parkar owns not a single illegal property."
Damn, boy. You tell it like it is. Oh, also, bro, you just sort of let it slip earlier that she passes away. later.
Oh no, oops, oh no,
Yeah.
this is information anybody can have if they literally Google Hasina Parkar.
That's true. Dude, you know what? I've had some people just sort of like randomly contact me the day before an episode comes out, and they're just like, hey, can you tell me who it is? And I'd be like, no. Then if I give you a name, you will Google it and then you'll ruin the episode for yourself, you dummy. Do you want that to happen
No.
to you? That's just like if I don't know if like, imagine you've never watched Space Jam and then someone tells you
Hey, oh my
that
God.
that Bugs Bunny wins at the end. That's tough, man. It's just so unnecessary.
To all of those people, I'd like to say we are doing so much research and we present it so cutely and we're like adorably funny. Just listen to us, please. Tell your friends.
Please tell your friends. And you know what? Let's take a little break here for some fresh air for us. You can step out and quickly text 10 friends each
Yes.
and let them
this
know about this
amazing
podcast.
Welcome back to the real world
No.
from your wonderful break. Okay, there is one thing that we can talk about that was all over the news in 2007.
Mhm.
Between April to August 2007, Hasina was arrested by the anti-extortion cell of the Mumbai police. Why, you ask? Well, for extortion. What were you expecting?
I really thought you would go like, I really didn't think you would explain it. I just thought you would end it at, yeah, she was arrested and everybody just had to presume it. But let me step you in here for a quick minute. What is extortion? Extortion is a crime under the Indian Penal Code. So Section 383 of the Indian Penal Code says, whoever intentionally puts any person in fear of some sort of injury, either to the person itself or some other person. And through this whole thing, they dishonestly induce the person who is in fear to either deliver some property or some sort of valuable security. That's called extortion. I said a lot of words. Basically, it is, listen, I might hurt you or I might hurt someone you know. You go get me a thing that I want, and that's extortion. Essentially, right? So the easiest way to understand extortion is to use an illustration directly from the IPC.
Yay, I love illustrations from the IPC.
Yay! Kids, listen to me. This is literally the first illustration under Section 383. It says, Person A threatens to publish a defamatory libel concerning person Z unless person Z gives him money.
Okay.
He thus induces person Z to give him money. Person A has committed extortion.
Wow, so beautiful. It should be on the Teletubbies.
The little son. Imagine the son is like, today we learn about extortion.
No, it's those four like tubbies that explain it. The son just laughs.
Oh yeah, the son is quite creepy actually. Okay, but like imagine, so this is what extortion really does. Okay, imagine you are in a position to have some like valuable information about somebody else. You might ruin their reputation or their livelihood might be at stake. Just something you can use to cause some sort of damage or injury to them. And you use this information to make that person give you money. That is extortion. It's really that simple. But it needs these elements. You have to have these specific elements for it to be extortion. Now, Section 384 of the IPC punishes extortion. Of course, it does. It doesn't just say it's a crime. It says, hello, you're going to jail. It's an imprisonment for up to 3 years, or you could also be fined. And I'm now done being a know-it-all. Please proceed, Nisha.
Hey, I like that part about you.
You know what? I feel, whenever you say stuff like that, I feel like a Ravenclaw. It makes you feel really nice.
Yes, you are a Ravenclaw, except nobody likes Rowling.
Oh no, ouch.
Yes.
Let's move on.
So, in April 2007, the Mumbai police arrested her. They said the charge was based on a complaint of extortion against Hasina and her family for taking 30 lakh rupees from a real estate agent named Vinod Avlani. Another source says it was actually 1 crore rupees, and we're not able to verify this with any copy of the charge sheet, unfortunately. Once again, we are thwarted by the Indian law enforcement and judiciary's refusal to just go digital.
Oh. Okay, I'm done.
Yeah. We're also given to understand that there was a bit of a chase. According to Hindustan Times, she evaded the police capture for a few days. Ooh. No, it was not a cool car chase. It was just refusal to turn up when she was summoned. Even that was only for like 12 days.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like, justice is slow and boring.
Clearly.
Yeah.
But yeah, eventually she turned herself in for questioning. There was also something really cool. Interesting. The public prosecutor that took up the case was a woman.
What?
Yes, it was Advocate Rohini Salian. You go, girl.
Yeah.
And she's a pretty famous figure. She was the former chief public prosecutor for the state of Maharashtra from 2001 to 2007 and a special prosecutor for the Indian National Investigation Agency.
Damn.
She's worked on so many cases, including the JJ Hospital shootout case, the 7/11 terrorist attack of 2006, and the 2002 Ghatkopar bombing. So she was almost 60 years old at the time of the Hasina case. That's pretty cool.
Man. Wow. Don't you just love powerful women?
Oh, that's the best.
Just like sploosh.
Yes, all the time.
Yeah.
Yes, queen.
Yes, queen indeed. Okay, so this case had many ups and downs. So the papers at the time got a little emboldened because now there were like police reports outrightly saying that she's going to be charged for something. So they'd come to a point where they were like outrightly like, haha, she's charged for extortion. Like it just became a media circus of sorts. Even now, if you look for reports from that time, it's just this. It's just near constant. Like she was booked, she was arrested, she was charged. It was just non-stop. Okay. But because of the hype that the police created around this themselves, it was a lot of pressure on the police to get this case like resolved, like get a conviction as soon as they could. In May 2007, though, she was granted bail and she had to pay a personal bond of 25,000 rupees, which is really not much for her at all. The court also directed her to go to the anti-extortion cell every day between noon and 4 p.m. for the rest of the month, next whole month, basically. Like just like go on a lunch date.
Yeah.
To the anti-extortion cell. She also wasn't allowed to leave Mumbai. So the courts, by the way, when they granted her bail, they were really pissed off at the police, essentially because they didn't believe that the facts of this particular case made a good case for extortion. We have some very lovely quotes by the additional chief metropolitan magistrate at the time, V.K. Sharma. He ripped into the police. Okay, I'm just going to read out the stuff that he said. First, when is it considered extortion? While accepting money or giving it? At most, a case of cheating can be made out. That's one. Two, if the facts of the first information are considered to be a gospel truth, the alleged act committed by the accused Hasina does not fit the definition of extortion.
Oh, no.
And then he closed his statements by saying this. Where is the material to show that the money retained had even reached Hasina? And the last, like the cherry on top of that pie. Prima facie, there's no case of extortion or forgery made out against her. Goodbye.
Oh, man.
Also, by the way, the FIR didn't mention her name, is what I'm given to understand.
Hey,
so
what?
I don't know. I just don't know. So the judge was like, come on, guys. Why did you arrest her? This makes no sense to me. Yeah. Eventually, the police revised the charge sheet to say cheating instead of extortion. But the humiliation was done. Like, they've been humiliated at this point, you know. And to be fair, the punishment for cheating is only 1 year as compared to 3 years for extortion. So they effectively had to really downgrade her, the charge that they made with her, that's awful. I mean, it sucks for them.
It does indeed. Yeah. So what happened with the case after that?
Oh, I don't know.
Oh, what?
that is kind of it. There's no more development after that. I've searched every possible forum that I could, every database that I could. I cannot find anything more than this, honestly. I couldn't even find a copy of the charge sheet. I would have loved to see that. That would have been beautiful. Even if I actually had a chance to read the full bail order, I would have loved that too. The stuff that we said that came from the judge was just from other articles that reported it. But that's it. There's no more development as far as we could find out. Yeah.
Actually, like, not much happened with Hasina after that as well. Like, she was still, obviously, she was still reigning over Mumbai, and she was still chilling in Nagpada. Of course, until 7th July 2014, unfortunately, because she passed away on that date. So this happened during Ramzan. She was observing her fast. She is reported to have complained of chest pains, and she was rushed to Habib Hospital nearby, but she did not survive. At the time, she was succeeded by 2 daughters and a son.
Interestingly, her funeral was very, very closely observed by the Mumbai police. This again reminds me of the Godfather movie.
Yeah.
Where isn't this literally the first scene? They open up
the wedding.
At the wedding, yeah. And there's like police officers deployed all around the wedding venue. And I think Sunny gets super mad and he breaks a journalist camera or something. Whatever. Like, basically it's very similar to that. So the first post reported that around that time, some 200 police officers were deployed to the area where her funeral was happening, just in case there was any unrest of any nature. Wow. The police also went to the extent of recording the funeral procession. And anybody who had attended the funeral as well. Like, they were keeping notes of that. That again, why does this particular scene reminds me so much of The Godfather? Because even in that, the police are sitting and noting down every car number that visits the venue.
Yeah,
it's
correct.
a lot like that. Yeah. So also India TV News reported that Dawood Ibrahim obviously didn't fly down to India for her last rites, but he watched her last rites over video conferencing. Which, I mean, even if you exclude who these people are and what they may have done in their lifetime, it's still quite sad, to watch your family, your siblings' last rites and not be present. That's got to be harsh, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, well, of course it's harsh, but a lot of families just went through that in the last 18 months during the, the coronavirus pandemic, which, okay, I've just depressed myself now. That was really quick.
Honestly, to be honest, some families don't even get to see it. So
actually, that's true. Yeah, I forgot about that part. Yikes. Okay, change the topic. Quick. This is really sad.
Okay, here's a fun fact. The Hasina Parkar movie, apparently Hasina's son had a special screening of that movie for like friends and family in Dubai.
Oh.
And while the rest of the world were like, Shraddha Kapoor, oh my God, you suck. the friends and family were like, hey, she's nice only. So,
okay.
Do what you want with that information.
Nothing. I will do nothing with that information. But I think it's quite nice on some level.
Sure.
Well, guys, now it's that time again where we are at the end of the episode. Nisha, my love, would you like to do a little musical number to recap what we have learned so far about Hasina?
No.
Okay, fine, fair. We should likely skip the musical number for this one. Okay, then, goodbye, everyone.
Wait. But before you switch off, don't forget to follow us on Instagram. You can catch me at Just Nishful Thinking. That's just.nishful.thinking. And Raghavi at ragi.dose.
Yes, that's correct. Oh, I thought you were going to wait for me to say it, but fine. Okay.
No.
You can find all of our sources. There are plenty for this episode on our blog. You will find the link in our description as well as the links to our Instagram handles. And we will see you on the next episode of Misconduct.
Bye, guys.